Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Redix Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Body Cream. 800-345-7339, on the web at uttercream.com. Is it possible to improve your immune response so you don't come down with a cold? Research shows certain herbs might help. This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Dr. Tieraona Low Dog is an expert on the benefits of everyday herbs and spices.
I do think that in general, if people would use more spices and culinary herbs in cooking, and they did that over a lifetime, we would probably see some beneficial effects for both the cardiovascular and the neurologic system, because many of these spices and culinary herbs are powerful anti-inflammatories and antioxidants.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, using herbs and spices and confronting controversies in medicine.
First, this news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, dangerous bacteria may be spread by healthcare workers' clothing. A meticulous study carried out at Duke University Medical Center tracked bacteria in samples taken from 167 patients' rooms, and the scrubs worn by 40 nurses. Scrubs are the clothes nurses and other healthcare workers wear on duty. The term scrubs originated when this clothing was provided for surgeons scrubbing in for an operation. The infectious disease experts found nasty bacteria such as Klebsiella and methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA. These bacteria leave fingerprints that allowed the researchers to determine where they came from. The nurses were given clean scrubs at the beginning of each 12-hour shift. Bacteria showed up most frequently on pockets and sleeves. Nurses picked up these dangerous germs from patients or the rooms themselves, although the rooms were cleaned every day. The lead investigator was quoted as saying, "We think it's more common than not that these bugs spread to patients in hospitals because of temporary contamination of healthcare workers."
Losing weight is hard, but Weight Watchers may now have a new tool. Researchers report that eating dinner early or even skipping the evening meal altogether helps dieters feel less hungry and burn more fat. The study was small, with just 11 people. During 4 days of the study, they restricted their eating to the hours between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. During another 4 days, they ate between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Their calorie intake was the same during both trial periods, and their reactions and metabolism were studied closely. The research indicates that timing of meals makes a difference for metabolism.
Spending time on a bicycle can help reduce the risk of heart attacks, according to a Danish study. The researchers collected data on nearly 54,000 people, including 45,000 who biked regularly for fun or transport. The volunteers were between 50 and 65 years old when the study began. During the next 20 years, there were 2,892 heart attacks in the group. The bikers were 11 to 18% less likely to experience a heart attack than those who did not bike. And those who began biking within the first 5 years of the study had a 25% lower chance of a heart disease diagnosis than those who did not bike at all. This study doesn't prove that getting on a bicycle will save your heart, but it does suggest it might have some benefits.
Heavy men with low levels of testosterone benefit from regular aerobic exercise. Researchers in Japan found that a 12-week program with jogging or walking for 40 minutes to an hour, 3 days a week, raised testosterone levels in a group of 28 overweight men. The men who exercised most vigorously got the greatest increase in hormone levels. 16 men of normal weight who also completed the program did not see a significant change in their testosterone levels. The overweight men also lost weight during the 3 months of exercise. Low testosterone can cause fatigue, low bone mass, decreased muscle, and flagging libido. It's exciting to have evidence that increasing activity can reverse these problems.
Over the last few years, a mysterious polio-like illness has been striking children across the United States. California and Colorado have been especially hard hit. The disease starts with flu-like symptoms, but rapidly turns into muscle paralysis. Doctors have dubbed this condition AFM, which stands for acute flaccid myelitis. After the respiratory symptoms subside, some kids are left with long-term nerve damage that can make it hard to move arms or legs. In the worst cases, breathing is also affected. That was also true with polio. Nationally, the CDC says there have been 89 cases of AFM this year, a dramatic increase from 21 cases in 2015. More than a third of this year's cases were diagnosed in September. Now, a new cluster of cases in Washington state has public health officials alarmed. One child has died and 8 others have been affected. The youngster who died was initially hospitalized with cold symptoms and dizziness, but quickly developed paralysis. Doctors have not yet identified the cause of AFM, but some speculate that it may be triggered by an enterovirus called D68. To date, there's no vaccine or treatment for this scary condition. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Are you coughing, sniffling, or sneezing? It is cold season after all. Lots of people are fending off viruses or succumbing to them, depending upon how strong their immune systems are. Is there anything we can do to improve immunity?
To help us answer that question, we turn to Dr. Tieraona Low Dog. She's an internationally recognized expert in the fields of integrative medicine, dietary supplements, and women's health. Dr. Low Dog has served as the elected chair of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Dietary Supplements and Botanicals Expert Information Panel. She was appointed to the Scientific Advisory Council for the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and she currently serves as the Fellowship Director for the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. Her latest book is Fortify Your Life, Your Guide to Vitamins, Minerals, and More.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Tieraona Low Dog.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you.
And it's so nice to have you back. Dr. Low Dog, it is cold and cough season, and people are going to be sniffling and sneezing, and they're going to be congested, and they're going to feel miserable, and they're going to go to the pharmacy and look for a solution. And we'll talk about some of those drugs in a moment. But first, I'd like to get a sense of the immune reaction, because if we were in a large lecture hall with 1,000 people, and some nasty person decided that he was going to pump into that lecture hall through the heating system cold and flu viruses so that everyone be exposed equally, not everybody would get sick. Why is that?
That's a great question. It really speaks to the soil, right? So I'm a gardener, as you know, and when we think about the physical body, we want to think about the health of the soil. Healthy soil helps resist, pests and insects and bugs in a garden and weeds. And in a human body, it helps us resist infection, and it means our immune system is a rapid responder. It doesn't mean that if I wasn't exposed to the cold virus that the virus didn't enter into my body. It just means that I have a rapid immune response that was able to sort of take care of it. I think that there's many things that go into making a healthy soil. You know that I believe a lot of it happens actually in utero and in childhood. I believe that we lay the foundations for a healthy immune system when we're very young. In a mother's womb, and are we getting all the nutrients that we need? Are we getting all of the omega-3s? Are we getting everything that we need to have a healthy immune and nervous system? And then young children, I think the more that they're exposed to germs, exposing the immune system at a young age so that it is challenged in healthy ways. So playing with puppies, having animals in the house, being out in the dirt, all of those kinds of things I think are really important for kids. Now, when we get older, there are ways that we can boost the immune system in addition to all of the things that you would know. We get sick more often when we are tired. We get stressed more around the holidays, maybe when we're drinking more and not sleeping as much. So all of the basic health, rules apply. But then there are additional things that one may want to do to actually nourish or build the immune system so that it's more resistant during the cold and flu season.
I think that's an interesting idea. A lot of listeners would like to know how to do that. A lot of their doctors are going to say, building the immune system, that's not something we know anything about.
Well, that's true, and that's because we now have powerful drugs like antibiotics and vaccinations to help prevent some of these more serious kinds of infections. But back when we didn't have those antibiotics, earlier physicians and healers around the world knew that they had to strengthen the body, especially during times when people may be more at risk for getting sick. And so this notion of immune tonics or things that strengthen the body's natural resistance, these are widely known in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, and certainly even in the old Galenical or Hippocratic kinds of traditions. So some of the things, again, all of them are foundational, so you can't take an immune-boosting herb and still stay out all night and not eat well. But if you were going to think of some of the herbs that could be easily added during the fall and winter season, astragalus would be very up to the top of my list. Now, astragalus, when you buy them in bulk, they look like long tongue depressors. The roots are sliced, so they look like old-time, tongue depressors. And they're very woody. And I buy them in bulk and then use them throughout the winter season. When I'm making rice, I just cut the little tongue depressor, that long sliver of root. I take a long one and I just cut it in 2 or 3 pieces with a pair of scissors and throw it in and let it cook with the rice and then take it out. I throw it in soup. I tell my patients, look, if you're just opening a can of soup, it doesn't matter what kind of soup. Put a little bit of that astragalus in there and cook it for 10 or 15 minutes and then just take it out and eat your soup. That astragalus, I think, really it builds the bridge between food and medicine. Astragalus is often added to soups and stews and other kinds of foods in China, especially in older people who may be convalescing or who are at risk for being sick. Now, astragalus does help the rapid response in the immune system. It can help prevent colds and flus, and certainly we use it in certain cases. Integrative cancer centers use this to help patients keep their immune system strong when it's been suppressed because of cancer treatment. So for the average person, astragalus would be way up at the top of my list, and you don't need to take it every day. You can just take it a few times a week. What you're trying to do is just give your immune system a little added boost, and that doesn't really need to be done daily. That really needs to be done a few times a week. 2-3 times a week is the way I take it.
Well, that sounds really useful. Are there other natural ways to boost immunity that you also recommend?
Well, for a lot of people, taking a nice mushroom blend, not the kind of the button mushrooms that we get at the grocery store, but mushrooms like shiitake, maitake, reishi. There's a number of companies that make very nice blends of these, what we call medicinal mushrooms. All of these mushrooms have beneficial effects on the immune system. And taking those, again, periodically throughout the winter and fall seasons can be very, very helpful for giving you an edge. A lot of integrative physicians recommend things like reishi for their patients who are more vulnerable towards infections, people that may have underlying respiratory problems, for instance, that have asthma or COPD.
Tieraona, I'd like you to spell reishi, because there are a lot of our listeners who don't quite know how that should be looked up on the web or in a health food store.
Of course. So reishi is R-E-I-S-H-I. Ganoderma is its botanical name, and these are mushrooms, obviously, so they're not plants; they're fungi. But reishi is a real powerhouse when it comes to the immune system. But many people also like shiitake mushrooms, and these mushrooms can be found at many grocers or better grocery stores, and these can be added to cooking. So again, I think thinking about some of these that bridge the gap between food and medicine are where we really want to play when it comes to the immune system. So mushrooms and astragalus would be way up there at the top of my list.
Well, now, when most people come down with the sniffles or a cough, they see the commercials on television, so they run to the pharmacy and they buy, fill in the blank, some cold and flu medicine, some antihistamine, a decongestant, probably a pain reliever like ibuprofen or perhaps acetaminophen. And I'm wondering, in the 2 minutes that we have before our break, how effective are over-the-counter cough and cold remedies? And are there any thoughts you have on boosting the flu shot effectiveness? Because in recent years, it hasn't worked all that well.
So, yes, I do think that people can use over-the-counter sort of analgesics if they're feeling uncomfortable or if their temperature is more than just mildly elevated. Most of these are for symptom relief. They're not actually helping your body fight off the infection. I would say that they're better things for doing that. Use that if you need it for a symptom relief, but over-reliance on them are problematic, as you know. Vaccinations or going in for a flu vaccine or a pneumonia vaccine, especially in vulnerable populations or in the elder population, this is intriguing to me. Now, one problem with the flu shot is that virus may mutate, meaning that this vaccination is not that effective for the strain that we're dealing with. But in other cases, we actually do have a good vaccine, but the individual who receives the immunization does not have an adequate immune response to be able to respond to the vaccine, making it less effective. If somebody's going to go and get the vaccine, a flu vaccine or a pneumonia vaccine, I would encourage them to consider taking something like ginseng or astragalus before they go to get the immunization. 1 to 2 days before, just dose up on some ginseng and astragalus. There have been a number of studies, actually almost for the last 20 years, we've had numerous studies showing that these can actually enhance the effectiveness, enhance the immune response of the person receiving the immunization. This may be particularly important for an elder person who just doesn't have the ability to mount that immune response. So you have to decide for yourself if you're going to get a vaccination. But I want to say I'm not opposed to them in particularly vulnerable populations who, if they did become sick with a flu or pneumonia, it could have very serious consequences.
You're listening to Dr. Tieraona Low Dog. She is currently the director of the first Interprofessional Fellowship in Integrative Health and Medicine, after leading the fellowship program founded by Dr. Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona's Center for Integrative Medicine for many years. Dr. Low Dog is an internationally recognized expert in the fields of integrative medicine, dietary supplements, and women's health. She served on the White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine Policy, and as the elected chair of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Dietary Supplements and Botanicals Expert Information Panel. Dr. Low Dog was also appointed to the Scientific Advisory Council for the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine.
After the break, we'll learn about the Ayurvedic herb ashwagandha.
Could turmeric help prevent dementia?
What's the best way to use this spice for greatest effect?
We know the Mediterranean diet is beneficial for a lot of health conditions. Could part of its power lie in the herbs and spices that it uses?
There might be some synergy through using herbs together.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Redx Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that deeply moisturize to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 1057. The number again, 800-732-2334. Online at peoplespharmacy.com.
We're talking today about how herbs and spices can be used medicinally.
Our guest is Dr. Tieraona Low Dog, Fellowship Director for the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. She has served as the elected chair of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Dietary Supplements and Botanicals Expert Information Panel and was appointed to the Scientific Advisory Council for the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine.
Dr. Low Dog, there is an herb, I guess, or I don't know how to characterize ashwagandha. I assume by the name it comes from India. Could you tell us a little something about it? It's becoming very popular.
One of my most favorite herbs, ashwagandha or Withania somnifera, which the species name sort of indicates its calming or more soothing effects, right, to induce sleep. And it doesn't make people sleepy, but it definitely has a somewhat calming effect on the body. Ashwagandha is considered an adaptogen, or an herb that allows the body to better adapt to stress. All kinds of stress, physiologic stress, emotional stress, physical stress. So when I think of ashwagandha, I totally think of this for people who are wired and tired, meaning they're running all day, they're exhausted, it's 9 o'clock, they want to go to bed, and it's like they get their second wind. They lay down and their eyes pop open, and they're busy thinking about all the things they've got to do tomorrow, and they can't turn their brain off. Ashwagandha is a wonderful herb to use for people who are looking to sort of relieve tension and anxiety, to improve their focus. It's very useful for people who, when we think about maybe attention and focus, ashwagandha can be very useful in this case. But adaptogens, I believe, are going to be some of the most important plants that we're going to investigate in the 21st century, just because of the level of stress that we're dealing with. And ashwagandha, unlike ginseng and rhodiola, which are more stimulating, ashwagandha tends to be more calming, soothing, while at the same time enhancing focus and perhaps even helping memory.
Now, we've had the opportunity to interview Dr. Dale Bredesen, who is a neurobiologist, a neuroscientist on the West Coast, and he's been studying Alzheimer's disease and all of the various factors that may contribute to it and a number of possible treatments. And he says, it won't boil down to just one thing. It requires multiple disciplines and multiple approaches. But one of the things he mentions is ashwagandha, and I wonder, do you think it might be helpful for the brain and brain function?
Absolutely. I think there's a number of plants, particularly out of India, that we're going to find are incredibly beneficial to the brain. Ashwagandha is one of them, but I would also include turmeric, and I would also include bacopa. All three of these herbs have very specific affinity for the brain. Turmeric, as a matter of fact, may actually help with the amyloid plaques or the aberrations that can develop within the brain in individuals with dementia. So I think that we're going to be looking perhaps at a cocktail of these herbs that can benefit the brain. I think the questions, and ashwagandha certainly fits up there for me, but the questions then become, how much? When would you start? Unfortunately, we don't really know who may develop these problems with cognition and memory, and so we often start our treatments after we begin to see symptoms. And I do worry that, we're jumping in too late. So would a number of these, for instance, ashwagandha for people maybe who are having problems with their memory, but also have problems with sleep and maybe feel kind of anxious, should we be using ashwagandha intentionally at a younger age over a prolonged period of time? Turmeric, I think, really is going to be a forerunner in this as well, only because it has such a broad array of health benefits that you could see people adding turmeric to their foods and also considering supplementation over a long period, because it may also help with arthritis. It may help with their cardiovascular system, may help prevent, certain cancerous growths, particularly in the GI tract. So I think that especially out of the Indian subcontinent, we're going to see some very powerful natural plants that are deserving of really good research so that we know. This really hits home for me, because we're beginning to see this with my mom. And the effects are subtle. They're slow. It's difficult to sort of tease out what we're seeing. And, we want to do everything we can to help these individuals. So, my mom's on Bacopa and turmeric. So for her, I really felt the Bacopa would be very beneficial because of its impact on memory, and then turmeric for all of its health benefits. Who knows if it's helping or not, and if we started, maybe if we would have started earlier. But I think that this is an area ripe for investigation, and those would be my top 3 for botanicals: ashwagandha, turmeric, and Bacopa.
Well, I know a lot of listeners are taking already curcumin, which is thought to be the active ingredient in turmeric. It has a few other compounds that potentially are doing something as well, but curcumin is the one that's been most studied. And some people are saying, well, I want to take the one that's best absorbed, so they're going for the BCM 95.
So the phospholipid bound?
Yeah.
Right. So curcumin is not well absorbed. There's a group of these yellow pigments that are found in turmeric, and we call them collectively curcumin. And we do think that that's where a lot of the powerhouse health benefits come from. The problem with curcumin is that it likes to stay in the GI tract, which is why it's so great for the intestines and the stomach. But if you're trying to get it out of the GI system, you have to do something to make it more bioavailable. There are 2 ways to do that. One is basically to add black pepper alkaloid to it, piperine. It's called piperine. That makes it be absorbed. Or the other one is for it to be bound to basically a phytosome, like a lipid substance, that allows it to be carried across the intestinal tract and up into the bloodstream. So either one of those is a good option if you're trying to get it out of the bloodstream. The advantage perhaps for not using the black pepper is that black pepper alkaloid, piperine, it also causes other drugs to be more absorbed. So people who are taking other medications may get higher blood levels, and that could be a problem. So, for people who are otherwise healthy, it doesn't matter which one you take. For somebody who's on multiple medications, I recommend that they use a curcumin supplement that does not have the piperine in it, but instead is bound to a phytosome, a lipid tail.
You know what I find so fascinating about Americans? I mean, we love pills. But if we were in India, we'd be eating curry. And
Yes.
we'd be getting fat, ghee, or coconut milk or oil in with our curry in some cases that would allow for the turmeric to be absorbed naturally better than perhaps, as
Yes.
you were saying, some pills. So I'm just thinking, vegetables in a curry on a regular basis might be a great way to get your turmeric.
So in India, we know there's about a 25% lower incidence of dementia. And that was partly what sparked some of the original research in animals looking at turmeric and curcumin to see its impacts on brain health. There's no question turmeric has beneficial effects on brain health. We learned about it not from people taking pills, but from people over a lifetime consuming turmeric in their diet. And, Also they often add black pepper to many of these dishes, peppercorns. So you're getting a combination of sort of fat and also pepper, both of which are going to dramatically enhance the absorption. I put turmeric, we use probably a teaspoon a day in our diet. I add it to lentil dishes. I cook it in rice. I put it in our pea soup. I love to put it in yogurt. Take a teaspoon and put it in a small amount of plain Greek yogurt, and then I'll baste the chicken with it and cook it and use that as like the sauce. And it's just delicious. And so there's so many ways to do this. I do think that in general, if people would use more spices and culinary herbs in cooking, and they did that over a lifetime, we would probably see some beneficial effects for both the cardiovascular and the neurologic system, because many of these spices and culinary herbs are powerful anti-inflammatories and antioxidants. And so it's one thing to start trying to like taking fish oil for 6 months and expecting miracles versus what we see in populations that eat fish over a lifetime. So again, I think this country it struggles with using salt and pepper as its primary spice. And I think, basils, oreganos, cardamoms, turmerics, all of these are really, they're very good for your health overall. And the more you learn to cook with them, the better your food will taste. You'll enhance your palate, but you'll also be doing something very good over your lifetime to protect your brain and your heart, especially as you age.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have seen a lot of research showing that the Mediterranean diet has multiple benefits for the heart, for the brain. It's anti-cancer, it's anti-diabetes, and what we have heard a few people, possibly even you, Dr. Low Dog, suggest is that part of the benefit of the Mediterranean diet is that along with the vegetables, along with the fish, along with the fruit and the whole grains are the spices. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think, you've definitely got the olive oil and you've got some of the other things, but look at how much garlic they consume in their diet. Huge quantities of garlic and leeks and onions, so a lot of these allium vegetables. But then you've got your basil, your thyme, rosemary, oregano, just these powerhouses. And one of the things people love about Italian food when they actually go to Italy, it's not fettuccine Alfredo. That's what people think of as Italian food in the United States. But when you actually go to Italy, everything is so flavored. If you got lamb, it's drenched in rosemary. Right? And when you get your olive oil and vinegar to dip your bread in, yes, they eat bread. Also, you're going to find sprinkles of herbs or rosemary leaves on it. The basil and oreganos are in all of the tomato bases. So for me, I think that, one, people love that type of food because it tastes so good. But part of the reason it tastes so good is because of the broad, heavy-handed use of spices and culinary herbs. You also see this in India. You see this in a number of ethnic cookings like from Thailand, etc. The United States, well, we all know. And we have a highly processed diet here where people are putting things out of boxes and they're not using whole foods. And along with whole foods cooking are whole herbs. So I'm a strong advocate for the heavy-handed use of spices and culinary herbs in cooking. Use them always and often.
Well, we like to reduce everything to its, one single ingredient, which is why we have pharmaceutical companies doing double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials with one drug versus a placebo. And that's the way we demonstrate effectiveness in this country. But you mentioned a little while ago about the cocktail of ashwagandha and a couple of other herbs, saying that it may be that combination that's better than any one ingredient. And certainly in Chinese medicine, that is a common theme. And when it comes to culinary herbs and spices, we don't just put one thing, just salt or just pepper. In the Mediterranean diet, they use a whole bunch of things, and you mentioned a few of them, like oregano and thyme and rosemary. And I'm just wondering about this idea of a cocktail, how things might work together synergistically far more effectively than just one thing alone, whether it's an herb or a spice.
I do believe that there is synergism. And in cooking, we're doing it mostly for flavor. But herbal medicine often has blended herbs together, rather to potentiate the effects or to even minimize adverse effects, right? It shocks me that in traditional Chinese medicine, they actually use something called aconite, monkshood, which is very toxic. But they used it with small amounts of licorice, and actually research has shown that licorice helps to mitigate the side effects, the dangerous effects of aconite. I'm not endorsing anybody use that. What I'm saying is that people have found ways to blend things together, either for synergism or to mitigate adverse effects. This concept of cocktails, though, it's not just in the natural world or in more traditional systems of medicine. We see it now in chemotherapy treatment. We realize that actually using cocktails, radiation and chemotherapy or several chemotherapy drugs at the same time tend to be more effective than single. We really advanced our ability to treat HIV so that now AIDS and HIV are more of a chronic disease than a death sentence. But how did that happen? Through actually the use of cocktails of medications. So I think we're going to continue to move forward, realizing that sometimes combining things in a thoughtful manner may be our best approach, just like some of the research that came out of China recently, looking at actually using an immunization, a vaccination that contained astragalus and ginseng. So moving beyond just thinking about one thing, but other things that may have an additive or synergistic effects, or that may mitigate some of the harmful effects of the treatment.
When it comes to mitigating adverse effects, some research shows that curcumin from turmeric can reduce the neuropathy caused by the anti-cancer drug cisplatin.
This notion of using things to help mitigate some of the adverse effects. Now, this is a classic example with cisplatin. Let's think about another herb that was studied, and actually the results were published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. Patients that were undergoing cancer treatments in more than 40 different institutions for all different types of cancer. They gave people ginseng, American ginseng, 2,000 milligrams a day for 8 weeks while they were undergoing their treatment. And what they found was that compared to placebo, it dramatically reduced cancer-related fatigue. This study was so important because also in the longer-term follow-up, there was no, it didn't make the medication work less well. There may be even some suggestions that there may have been added benefit. But we need this kind of research because cancer treatment, many people are going to go through it, and it can be so difficult, and the side effects like the neuropathy can be lifelong.
You're listening to Dr. Tieraona Low Dog. She's director of the Interprofessional Fellowship in Integrative Health and Medicine. She led the fellowship program founded by Dr. Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona's Center for Integrative Medicine for many years.
It's so fascinating to me, Terry, because there was a time when Chinese medicine was kind of, they put all these things together. It makes no sense. It's a little dangerous. And now we're learning that cocktails, especially in the treatment of cancer, these chemotherapy approaches, is actually better than just a single drug itself. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk about some current controversies in healthcare.
It often seems that there's more consensus on the best treatment than is really the case.
Dr. Low Dog will weigh in on the statin debate.
We'll also find out about controversies associated with treating low thyroid function.
What about the controversies over nutritional supplements?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening to this podcast of The People's Pharmacy. If you like it, why not rate or review it in the iTunes store? We'd appreciate it. Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter. helping dry, cracked feet feel utterly soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1057. The number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're tackling some controversial topics in healthcare. We've discussed using herbs to boost our immune response, prevent dementia, and treat a number of other conditions. Now we'll turn our attention to some other controversies.
We're talking with Dr. Tieraona Low Dog. She's the director for the first Interprofessional Fellowship in Integrative Health and Medicine. Previously, she led the fellowship program founded by Dr. Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona's Center for Integrative Medicine.
Dr. Low Dog, a lot of our listeners, and I think a lot of patients in general, think that most physicians are in total agreement on most treatments, that there's guidelines and consensus, and that if you were to go to a physician in California or in upstate New York, they'd basically agree on everything. Well, it turns out it's a lot more complicated than that, and perhaps the most recent example is what I'll call the statin wars, and in particular, the pretty nasty debate between the BMJ, used to be known as the British Medical Journal, and another journal in England called The Lancet. Could you tell us a little bit about what that's all about? Because we've been told that there's been an effort by the folks at The Lancet to shut down this discussion in the BMJ.
Well, first, we really need scientific debate. In medicine, as in all science, there needs to be the room for people to honestly debate the evidence, and also then that broad application to a broad audience. You have to treat so many people with statins to actually benefit a very small number. I mean, that's the reality. So when the BMJ challenges the broad use of statins and dares to question that maybe they may not be as beneficial for as many people as we are told, and that they have adverse effects. So if a physician's duty is first do no harm, we have to know what all the evidence really says. And this is why it's so important that we have access to differing opinions. When The Lancet comes out, another British journal, when they come out and basically say that the British Medical Journal or the BMJ should retract, and they should be scolded for saying that statins may not be the best thing since, sliced bread ever, this is deeply concerning for me. It's deeply concerning for me as a physician because we know how powerful the pharmaceutical industries are. We know how results can be published or not published based upon the outcome. We know how statistics can be used or twisted. So having researchers be able to publish their opinions and their interpretations of the evidence is absolutely critical. And for me, I think The Lancet should be ashamed of themselves. This is the whole point of publishing research, is so that we can have honest debates about it. The story on statins is not closed by any stretch of the imagination. And in my opinion, they are overprescribed because they're easy. I have patients that come in and they're just on a statin, so they don't think they need to change their diet. They don't think they need to lose weight. My cholesterol's fine. I'm taking a statin, and they just are eating horribly, not exercising. And this notion that there's just a pill and it gets you out of sort of making other changes in your life is also dangerous.
Heart disease and statins to prevent heart disease aren't the only controversies that we've seen recently in medicine. So I wonder, Dr. Low Dog, if you could enlighten us a little bit about the controversy over thyroid treatment. There are so many people who have or apparently have underactive thyroid, and when they go to their doctor, they're told this is the one and only diagnostic and this is the one and only treatment. And if you don't feel better, there's something wrong with you. It's not our treatment. What do you think?
Wow, that is a big one. And it's also controversial because if you happen to disagree with just using a TSH, so when you come in and you're having symptoms that may suggest thyroid problems, constipation, dry skin, maybe some fatigue, weight gain, etc., one of the things that is often used as a screening tool is a thyroid stimulating hormone test or a TSH test. Now, as an initial screening tool, that can be very useful for the broad public. And I want to just remind you that the TSH test used to be quite a large range from 0.3 to more than 5, whatever the units were, I forget. But so if somebody came in and was 4.2, they were told their thyroid was normal, even though they clearly were symptomatic for low thyroid. Over time, we realized that range was too large and we made it more narrow. But still you have people come in and if the range is 0.3 and it's to 3 and they're 2.9, they're told their thyroid is normal. Well, actually for many of those people, if you get their TSH down to closer to 1, all of their symptoms disappear and they're like different people. Their depression lifts, their weight goes down, their cholesterol improves. I mean, it's shocking. Now, so that's one thing is the TSH is that's the primary screening tool. Is it sufficient? Well, possibly not. Many people would argue that you need a broader array of tests, free T4, a T3, maybe reverse T3, a series of these to actually look more broadly at what these thyroid hormones are doing in the body. T4 is what we typically give people, like a Synthroid. We give them a T4. Now, T4 is more plentiful in the body, but it's not the active form. The really active power player is T3. Some people may have difficulty converting T4 to T3. That may not be very efficient in certain individuals. And when you give people just the T4, they still come back complaining, even though their TSH is going down and the numbers on the lab tests are improving, they still feel bad. So some clinicians add a T3. And that can be done through compounding or it can be done through just prescribing a T4 or a T3 or it's by using Armour, which, contains the range of thyroid hormone. And when you give people that T3 or you give them that combination of T4, T3, in 8 weeks, 12 weeks, they're just like different people. Now, to say that just T4 and a TSH, that just using T4 as a thyroid hormone and TSH as a screen, and that's all you need to do, and you should be fine, is really not practicing very personalized medicine or individualized medicine. And I personally I've had so many patients that when we tweaked it, when we gave them the T4, T3 combination, when we got their TSH down to around 1, which is still very, very safe within that normal range, they just had more energy. They lived a more full life. So for me, this is an interesting challenge. And again, it's sort of like cookie cutter medicine. Here's what you do, and if you don't respond, it's your problem. This is why I practice integrative medicine. This is why I practice integrative medicine because I believe that we have got to we've got to look at each individual sitting across the table from us, and we also have to keep up on the literature. And I do not believe it's a placebo effect. I'm curious what you all think from your listeners and your take on this.
What we've actually found kind of interesting about these controversies is that we have heard a lot about evidence-based medicine. It even now has its acronym, EBM, evidence-based medicine, and a lot of the people who were trained 10, 15, 20 years ago have really embraced this concept, of EBM. This is where the action is. But we've also heard something else called eminence-based medicine, also abbreviated EBM, based on the reputation of what we'll call the loudest shouters, the people who are highly respected. And so when it comes to things like thyroid, they basically say, that is to say the eminence folks say, well, there's no evidence that people don't just do well on levothyroxine T4. But we've actually talked to the researchers who have found what, Terry?
Well, we talked to Dr. Bianco, who found that there actually are genetic differences in the genes that encode for the specific enzyme that converts T4 to T3. And some people with this genetic difference, and it's maybe 10 or 15% of the population, are less efficient, as you say. And we have seen a number of research studies that show that people feel better. Some of these people feel better if they're given some T3 along with their T4, even though the test results don't come out significantly different. People say, this is better. I feel good instead of bad. So we're inclined to believe that when people tell us they feel better, we should be paying attention.
Yeah, I agree. That's interesting. I had not heard of eminence-based medicine. I will say, though, that, in a more general thought pattern, reductionism has been what's driven science, really, for the last 100, 150 years. And it's brought so many things. It's just, my smartphone, unraveling the human genome. These are just powerful things that reductionism has brought. I would also say, though, that there's a danger in reductionism because sometimes we lose our sense of the whole. We forget to bring it back to the whole. So when I'm sitting with somebody, and this is what their lab tests are saying, but they're saying, I don't feel good, then my job is to continue partnering with them to try to figure out, where's that coming from? And there's an arrogance that assumes that if the lab tests are normal, that everything's fine. And then they're sent on their way, and they're just left to struggle. And for me, there's so many things we don't understand yet. We don't understand. I think we're going to find genetic variation in all kinds of things that explain why certain people may respond to certain treatments and not others. But I find that, there's a John Mayer song and there's a line in it that says, when they own the information, they can bend it all they want. And this is why to have integrity in medicine also means we have to look at everything, and that a meta-analysis or a systematic review can actually lose some of the finer points that are found in individual studies. And so I'm grateful for the work that you do. I'm grateful for the work that the People's Pharmacy has continued to do over these many years to bring some of these controversies to the everyday person out there who's trying to synthesize what this information is and what it means to them personally.
Well, that brings us to our last question, and that has to do with another very controversial area, nutrients. Because we are all in agreement that real food is the best way to go, and that we all should be eating our fruits and vegetables and our whole grains and our lentils and legumes. But for some people, it's harder than others. And if we're taking certain medications, sometimes they can deplete the body of essential nutrients, no matter how good a diet we have, which is what led you to write the book, Fortify Your Life. So could you just, in the last couple minutes that we have, give us some sense of where you stand on dietary supplements and, in particular, vitamins and minerals?
Food is foundational. Whole food is foundational. The problem is roughly 22 to 25% of Americans do not consume more than one fruit or one vegetable per day. We also have now a growing number of people who are gluten-free, those who are lactose intolerant, people who are vegans. So the list goes on for people who may have specific health needs or health problems that are also limiting the choices of food that they consume. Layer onto that the number of medications now that people take that also deplete certain nutrients from the body. I am a firm believer that most people benefit from taking a low potency, no megadosing, a low potency multivitamin, multimineral on most days. I believe that that is like an insurance policy against nutrient gaps in the diet. Women taking oral contraceptives, we find that they become very low in B6. The CDC found that the majority of women taking oral contraceptives become low in B6, which increases their risk for irritability, poor focus, depression, etc. People that are on proton pump inhibitors, B12, magnesium, calcium, iron. So think of how many, and metformin, B12, significantly. So this notion that we continue to tell people that that vitamins and minerals are not necessary, we may not be seeing the frank scurvy or frank rickets that we saw in the past in this country. I believe, though, that many of the more borderline things we see with fatigue, depression, anxiety, etc., I think many of these may be due to marginal nutritional deficiencies.
Dr. Tieraona Low Dog, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dr. Tieraona Low Dog. She's an internationally recognized expert in the field of integrative medicine, dietary supplements, and women's health. Her latest book is Fortify Your Life, Your Guide to Vitamins, Minerals, and More. Dr. Low Dog has served on the White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine Policy and as the elected chair of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Dietary Supplements and Botanicals Expert Information Panel. She was appointed to the Scientific Advisory Council for the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. She currently serves as the Fellowship Director for the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wodarski is our engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream, with 20% urea for extra skin protection. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1057. The number 800-732-2334. You can also place your order online at peoplespharmacy.com.
And when you visit the website, you can check out information on prescription drugs, herbal medicines, and home remedies. You can share your thoughts on today's show. What are your favorite herbs or spices? How have you used them to improve your health or ward off a cold? And how do you deal with medical controversies like the ones we talked about with regard to thyroid or statins? We'd love to have your feedback.
Well, when you go to our website, you can also sign up for our free online newsletter twice a week to your email inbox, or the free podcast of the show. That will allow you to listen at your own convenience, or you can share it with a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you so much for listening, and please do join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.